If you haven't seen any of my other videos, my name is Ethan Zook. This is the fourth of a series of videos which I'm making entitled Bad Arguments Against Evolution. And this one will be a bit of a mini-series in and of itself, because in this video I will be tackling the claim that there are no intermediate forms in the fossil record. The video 4 Problems with Evolution by Charlie states that a major problem with evolution is that there are no intermediate forms. And this argument always makes me a little bit upset, because I have received training in paleontology, and so I know about many of the intermediate forms. However, this argument continues to pop up. The theory of evolution by natural selection postulates that over time animals will change due to an accumulation of small changes in DNA called mutations, and that over time it is possible for a species of animals to give rise to many other species of animals. And they proceed by a mechanism known as natural selection, or several other mechanisms which I went over in another video. And the idea is that over time, numerous transitional forms should arise, and we should be able to find remains of those in the fossil record. Many people say that there are no transitional forms, and in fact during Darwin's time there weren't that many. In fact, he even devotes a section of his famous book on the origin of species to this very problem. He writes, "Why then is not every geological formation and every stratum full of such intermediate links? Geology assuredly does not reveal any such finely graduated organic chain, and this perhaps is the most obvious and serious objection which can be urged against the theory. The explanation lies, as I believe, in the extreme imperfection of the geological record." Now, luckily, our understanding of the fossil record has increased since Darwin's time and since The Origin of Species was published in 1859. But as Darwin said, if there were no transitional forms, then that would truly be a problem for the theory of evolution. So let's explore this a little bit. Are there really such transitional forms? Well, there are, but I can't demonstrate them to you from the safety of my apartment here. And for this, we're going to have to go to Washington, D.C. D.C. is about 2 hours from Harrisonburg, which is enough time to tell you a little bit about transitional forms. A transitional form is an animal which is found at some point along the evolutionary progression from one group of animals to another. It doesn't necessarily mean it's nicely and tidily in the middle, but it does mean that it shares anatomical features with both groups of animals. So, they can be difficult to find and difficult to recognize for several reasons. First, the fossil record is quite incomplete. The chances of an organism becoming a fossil are very low, and many factors have to work together in order for an animal to fossilize. Second, a transitional fossil will sometimes have only 1 or 2 of the features of the animals that descends from it at that time in geological history. A lot of people are confused about transitional fossils. For some, this is because they misunderstand how evolution takes place. Evolution does not happen in a straight line like this cartoon that shows a progression from monkey to ape to caveman to man. Rather, evolution is a branching tree, with populations of original animals which diverge into 2 new species when they are isolated by migration and environmental factors. Darwin theorized this in 1859. He did not come up with the straight line model, as you can see by his drawing here. Because evolution proceeds by a branching tree, finding the true transitional fossils, which would only be found at the nodes of the branching tree, here in red, is very difficult. More often, we find examples of ancestral species, or the ones that split off. These still show how the species evolved, however, and are still valid transitional species. Furthermore, since evolution is a continuous process, it can be said that every species is a transitional species, with the exception of those species, like Tyrannosaurus rex, that went extinct before they gave rise to new species. Many creationists distort the definition of transitional species and insist that for a species to be transitional, it must be halfway between the 2 species. This has led to gross misconceptions and statements like there are no transitional fossils. It's also led to cartoons, for example, like this one here, half duck, half alligator. This idea is false. Different features evolve at different rates and different times. Therefore, a transitional form does not have to fill an absolute halfway position. So why do we have to go to DC? On its own, D.C. is a cool city, so I really need no justification for visiting.
I'm here in Washington, D.C. right now, and as you can see, it's pretty cold. I used to work here a summer ago, so it's nice to be back and go to the Natural History Museum again. I hope you'll be able to spend some time looking at what I have to say.
But more important for our purposes, Washington, D.C. is home to the National Museum of Natural History, one of the museums of the Smithsonian Institution. It's home to many very important specimens, including anthropological and archaeological specimens. We're after the biological specimens today, specifically the fossils. The NMNH is widely considered one of the best natural history museums in the world. The Natural History Museum in D.C. is more attractive than other world-class museums, like the American Museum of Natural History in New York, or the British Museum in London, or even the Chicago Field Museum in Chicago for a couple reasons. First, it's within easy driving distance, 2 hours or so. Second, I worked there, so I know what's there. Finally, and most importantly for a college student, it's free and open 364 days a year, except for... Our first fossil issue will be the Cambrian explosion. Prominent creationists are fond of saying that during the Cambrian explosion, a hugely diverse fauna of animals suddenly appeared, and all the phyla found today developed. Jonathan Wells, author of the creationist book Icons of Evolution, has even said during an interview that all animal types appeared during a short period in the Cambrian in the form that they are in now. Creationists even state that a member of the phyla humans are grouped in, Chordata, appeared during the Cambrian explosion. First things first, the Cambrian explosion was not really so explosive after all. The accepted time span was around 80 million years. To put that in perspective, the dinosaurs went extinct 65 million years ago. This is plenty of time for animals to evolve and diversify into a very diverse fauna. Furthermore, there was life before the Cambrian. An example of this life is Spriginia, which is generally thought of as an ancestor of trilobite. Second, the animals of the Cambrian, while distantly related to the animals of today, did not appear in their present form. We no longer have trilobites running around, or hallucigenia, or Marella splendens, the most numerous Burgess form and a type of trilobite, or Apabinia, or Canadapsus, or finally Animalcaris, to name a few. So Wells is wrong on 2 counts so far. The Cambrian was not much of an explosion, and the animals were quite different from today's animals. So what about this Cambrian chordate? A chordate is simply an animal with a spinal cord. This giraffe is an excellent example of one. Creationists say that since phylum Chordata was around very early, life on Earth really couldn't have changed that much, so evolution is false. After all, a member of the phyla that humans are part of was around. Well, when they say this, you'd expect some sort of human ancestor to be found in the Cambrian. That's what it sounds like, right? Well, not quite. What they don't tell you is that the Cambrian explosion took place entirely in the ocean. So, this chordate must have been aquatic in some way, shape, or form. Actually, it's in this picture here. Can you find it? It's right there. This is Pichia gracilens. Pichia is the first chordate in the fossil record so far. It was found in the mid-Cambrian. And the interesting thing about Pichia is it's a chordate, but it doesn't have any bones. So essentially, while it is a member of Chordata, it's not anything like us. Here's a family tree of Chordata, and as you can see, there are quite a bit of different animals in that phyla. And actually, there are still animals around like Pichia, and you can see it there by the red arrow. And in fact, Pichia is on this actual chart. It's right there with the purple star. Now you can see that there is a whole lot of evolution that has to happen between Chordata, where Pichia is, up to where mammals are. And then even more evolution has to happen from mammals to humans. So by saying that a chordate was around during the Cambrian, creationists also have to accept that a huge amount of evolution happened to get from Pichia to us. So what of the Cambrian explosion and our chordate? Well, first of all, yes, there was a chordate in the Cambrian times. However, it is not, as the creationists would have us believe, an argument against evolution, because getting from Pichia to us would require macroevolution in the best definition of the word, across even family lines, not only genus and species. So Pichia is actually a good example of one of the transitional forms between animals without a notochord towards animals like us with a vertebra. Second, the Cambrian explosion as a whole is not a good example of creation out of nothing. Because, first of all, there was a long, gradual buildup of animal life towards the Cambrian. Second, it wasn't an explosion so much at all. it happened over 80 million years. So really, the Cambrian is just an example of evolution in action, rather than a special creation event. So any arguments by creationists that attempt to use these are false. I've had to break this video up into multiple parts. This is the end of the first one. Please go on to part 2, where we will talk about whale evolution, among other things.